outside of SeaTac, we have a lot of noise problems with the community.
Small group today.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody, thank you for being here. This is the Great Falls International Airport Authority Board meeting. Today is February 27th, 2024. The mission of the Great Falls International Airport Authority is to optimize transportation service and development in our region, and the vision of Great Falls International Airport Authority is to maximize the airport's benefit to our region. Welcome to everybody that showed up today. Appreciate being here. To the public, we'd love to hear anything you have to say, so if you do have something to say, please feel free to stand up, state your name, and we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Can I ask just real quick, did we put a sign on that door?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually,
Because Susan was planning to come, so I'm surprised. Oh, I saw her yesterday at lunch.
Yeah, looks like you're about to walk in. All right, I'll start with a quick roll call. Commissioner Eretz is not here today. Commissioner Gibbs. Here. Commissioner Houston. Commissioner Lalonde is present. Commissioner Hogan, not present. Commissioner Thompson, not present. And Commissioner Swathwood.
Present.
Perfect. All right, with the quorum of the board present, I will call the meeting to order. As soon as we get settled, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I am off it.
Most important part of the public meeting is to lock it.
Makes for quieter meetings.
I'm very hungry. All right. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll start with the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine day-to-day items that require board action but do not appear to have a significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion or vote by any board member. This month, we have item A, approval of board meeting minutes from January 2024. Item B, payroll checks totaling $125,278.37 for January 2024. Item C, maintenance and operations checks number 28039 to 28110, totaling $291,106.84 for January 2024. Item D, approve passenger facility charge totaling $55,596.30 for January 2024. And item E, financial reports for January 2024. Does anyone have any items they would like to pull for further discussion on the consent agenda? Perfect. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve.
All right, got a motion. Any further discussion? Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Got a second. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And nay. The ayes have it. Before we start, I guess we should, real quick, I think I always miss this. Are there any agenda items today that present conflict of interest to anyone on the board? Perfect. Director's report.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Just a couple quick things on the director's report this month. January boardings were at record levels. We vested, 2016 was the previous record, by about 150 passengers, and so that's good. At the same time, we had a lot of empty seats. Delta in particular on Salt Lake and Minneapolis wasn't able to get out of the mid-60s for a load factor. We'd like to see that about 10% higher. So we still have more capacity to absorb with the existing flights than we are currently absorbing. So that's a concern going forward. Obviously, we don't want to tailor back any of our service. Hopefully we can grow into those flights over time. This summer, for example, we'll have about, looks like about 9–10% more capacity than we had in 2019. So that's positive, but again, filling the seats is the objective. So hopefully as we get into the busier part of the year, March tends to be kind of a return quarter. We'll be filling up some of these additional seats. You may have seen in the report, Chicago is back this summer. They'll be on RJ on Saturdays, so a little bit smaller plane than we had last year, but good to see that we still have that route. And United has loaded 319s throughout June. As we get to the end of the month, we'll see some 320s mixed in on busier weekends in July. So good capacity increase from them. Delta, as of yet, hasn't changed the Minneapolis flight. We had heard that they might go to an Airbus or have a second iteration of a 76-seater, but as of yet is not loaded. So we've got similar MSP capacity that we have most of the year. So hopefully we'll see yet some capacity improvements. A reminder, we've mentioned a couple times already, that Alaska is bringing back their second daily flight. That'll happen in mid-May, and that'll run through October, we're told. As of yet, the schedule is only loaded through June, so if you go out and look for the flight in September, you can't find it yet, but that load should happen any day now as they look at them. Airlines are right now loading their summer schedules. It used to be they did that 6 months ahead of time, but since pandemic has really condensed down. And sometimes we even see schedule changes just 2 or 3 weeks out, which is crazy, but it happens. But nonetheless, shaping up to look like a strong year activity-wise and seat-wise. Operating expenses and revenues, if you look through the financials on expenses, we're just about right where we need to be at this point during the year, about 100% of planned budget. We're kind of through the bulk of the snow season, hopefully. So we've got some categories that are overspent, but those categories should be done being spent. Paints and chemicals, things like that, we're already done spending for the year on those. So some of those categories are fully exhausted. But as best we can tell, it looks like we're pretty well on plan for expenses. Revenue-wise, we're a little ahead of schedule. Revenue's been a little stronger than expected. We've had some record parking revenues, and rental cars have held up well, food and beverage. So as best we can tell, it looks like financially it's at the midpoint of the year, a little bit beyond. We're in pretty good shape. On the capital project report, we've got work commencing, as you can hear out the window, on the canopy project. There's a good amount of that work that's inside, so they're starting on that now. We wanted to get the terrazzo polished before the summer flights start. Obviously, in a couple weeks at this point, really, we'll start to see Alaska and some bigger planes from United. So if we can get that terrazzo uncovered and polished before we start seeing those bigger daily volumes, it'll be good for us to get that done. So the canopy project has several internal elements. They're pulling down the signage soffit, that blue band we used to have, kind of went around the entirety of the first floor. We removed it during the ticketing project. We liked how it looked a lot better. Really opens up the full ceiling height, looks a little less cavey in the bag claim area. So we're pulling that out. Most of the carpet will go away. We'll revert back to the original terrazzo. Obviously there's a lot of glue that's got to be polished off and stripped and then rebuilt up for the finish. So a lot of work will happen there. And then we're going to auger in the floor seam between the carpet and the terrazzo, as we've done on all the entrances. When you go down there, it's a flat transition now with a brass backer strip, so there's not a tack down transition like we have in the rest of the terminal. Those tack downs, as the bags roll across them and people step on them, they eventually break and stick up, and so we've had some tripping hazards out there. And it's hard on the terrazzo because you're actually tacking it into the floor. So we'll be pulling all that out with this with the canopy project, and then on the second floor with the second floor remodel and augering in a carpet line will be a lot easier to maintain. Let's see, column wraps will be another thing done in this phase of development. We really like the way the column wraps turned out here with the stack stone, and so we're going to extend that all the way across in the baggage claim. I think there's 3 or 4 more columns on that side to do. Those are most of the internal elements. After that, ordering parts and everything for the canopy, obviously already underway, and hopefully we'll get an early spring and get going on some of the reconstruction of that canopy out there. I think that's going to be a really exciting project, fix some of the operational issues with it, and signage issues and also really dress up the front of the building, so exciting project. Fountain repairs are underway. You might have noticed they've done some cleanup already. They got in there and they think they found the leak, the source of the leak. So they've added some caulking and work in there to try and keep it from leaking. We'll be doing some testing, I think, here pretty soon to make sure it's watertight. Then they'll be recoloring the rock, restacking the rock. This morning we bought a cougar from an estate sale. So it's surprisingly hard to find a used cougar, I guess. and it's not any easier to find a new one, but yeah, we did acquire a cougar this morning, and so we have that down in storage here, and we're going to be giving that over to the fountain repair guys so they can kind of see how to build the rock around it. I think it's going to be really cool. We're going to try to get it up a little bit. Off of the water, so it's not getting sprayed all the time, which is kind of what happened to the last one. It got, over time, just damaged from that constant water spray. So if we can get it up a little bit, that'll probably preserve the life of it a little longer. Everyone's excited to see that coming back. Signage project continues. You might have noticed on the way in today, we have a grate over there on the deck. That's just it, great, hopefully next week as the temperatures warm up, they'll be back out. Everything's drilled already for the other letters, so if they can get a couple days of decent weather, they should be able to get those installed. Rod and I met with the painter to work on these flag signs. You may remember on some of these columns throughout there were flag signs that said things like elevator was right here. I can't remember all the messaging is, bag claim, I think. We've taken all those down to be repainted. They'll get painted the rust color like the big Terminal 2 All Gates sign, and then they'll be rehung. We actually got new signboards for them, so the signboards themselves will be new, but the arms, which were decorative and have fish and pine cones and different things on them, those will be converted to rust and rehung. And then the big sign should go up sometime in the next month or two above the escalator. The big blue sign comes down. The new sign is a little bit different style. There's a big beam that spans both of those columns, and the sign hangs down from that. There's a large central clock, which is something we get a lot of requests for. To have a clock in the building, so we'll have a nice large central clock, and then the new sign up there. So hopefully here in the next 2 months, we'll see the signage.
Hopefully sooner.
Hopefully sooner. It's slow going with the signage guys. On our other zombie project, the Oshkosh snowblower is about to come out of the production line and maybe shipped here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I heard from them on Monday, and it was getting the head put on, and it had a little bit more testing to do and some radio installs, and he couldn't give me a date yet, but
Hopefully,
it's gotta be
yeah,
getting
this
close.
spring we'll see that. So
Yeah.
that's exciting. A really good piece of equipment for us to get replaced. As our last one, I think, is a 92, is it not?
Yeah, 91.
91.
Yeah.
Pretty old machine. Make a great backup, but we don't rely on it every storm. The warehouses are about complete. We're still waiting on electrical switchgear. Electrical switchgear is kind of one of the holdovers from the pandemic that seems like the supply chain is still not caught up to. Pretty much every project, everyone you talk to, switchgear is one of the long lead items. 2 years is kind of what the wait time is. So that's supposed to arrive in May and be installed then. Until then, the city has expressed some willingness to let us open that building with single-phase electric and not having the fire pump. The main thing we need that switchgear for is to power the 480 power, and so that's what is required to run the fire pump. But the building itself isn't large enough to require sprinklers yet. We made a decision with Anderson, since that building is expandable and there's no good way to go through somebody's office or shop or whatever it would be and put in a new sprinkler line and tear up their ceiling and all that improvements they may have made, where they've hung lights and everything else. After we've built it, there's no good way to retrofit. So we decided to go ahead and put the sprinkler in the initial phase so that it's there. We can continue to extend off of it. The city has said we might be able to get a temporary occupancy certificate if we had somebody that wanted to move in right away. Otherwise, in May, we should have everything done. Let's see, tower closures, I think you may have seen in the weekly report, the tower is dramatically understaffed. I think they're up to a dozen people understaffed, and it's resulting in some closures overnight primarily. We've had some daytime closures too, but they simply aren't getting the applicants that want to come to Great Falls. From talking to the tower in more detail, it sounds like a good portion of the problem is that because we don't have a lot of traffic relative to many options, we're a low-paid tower, so our band of payment is pretty low. And so when the graduates come out of Oklahoma City, they can kind of bid on different jobs that they might want, kind of based on their placement in their class, and we're one of the ones that don't get any bids. So kind of we don't get a lot of people coming here, and if there's a lot of jobs open, we don't get any applicants. So I think the problem is complex, and something that's likely to continue to be out there for a while. I think part of the issue going forward is FAA really needs to consider some changes to how they're conducting that training, so that potentially some of the entry-level stuff could be done in communities, either online or through community colleges, to attract more people that can't go away from home for 6 months and complete the schoolhouse work. As you can imagine, a young parent, or someone who's transitioning careers, like say a Malmstrom airman that's coming out of the military, that would be an excellent position, but it's hard to say I can go away for 6 months and complete this schooling. And so if some of the entry-level classes could be offered through maybe universities that have flight programs like Rocky or MSU, or even online options, then kind of like with a pilot's license, the ground school, you can complete that many places that may not have the pilot training. And so if we could kind of pursue a model like that, I think that could really help FAA recruit. I also think, and I've talked to the tower a little bit about, I think locally, we can get involved with the high schools and community college and other, and Malmstrom and others, to encourage people to go into that line of work. It is only about 6 months of training before you can report on site, begin filling positions in the terminal, or in the tower. You can't be fully certified until you've worked through that certification, which takes another 6 months, but you're actually filling shifts. And so I think it would be a great career for somebody that doesn't want to commit to a 4-year degree or doesn't have the resources to attend a full college regimen. It'd be a great way to get folks coming out of high school, because they'll take an 18-year-old with a degree or with a diploma. And so I think we need to get that word out locally, because the more we can do to attract Montana controllers into the system, the better likelihood that we're going to get Montana controllers that come out of the system and want to stay in Montana. And so I think that could really be useful. And since the payback is relatively short, unlike a 4-year degree, I think it's worthwhile to make an effort to get the high schools and the community college involved with that. So we'll be doing that. There's supposed to be a big posting coming out in March. Like every federal job, and any of you that have ever worked with the federal, they don't do much recruiting. They post them on a website. It doesn't look like they even do anything locally to tell people that there's a hiring coming. But the next on-ramp is in March. So coming up here shortly, there'll be an opportunity to maybe get some new controllers in that system.
What are the costs of those programs, this certification?
From my understanding is it's free. If you can get approved on the application, they send you to school in OKC, the FAA school, and so you get that training. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't get paid to take the training.
I'm sure they
Yeah,
do.
yeah, I would imagine so. And so that's why I think it's a great career path for a young person that that wants an alternative to a 4-year degree, or military, or even someone coming out of the military that wants to stay in a government type position that would like to work on the civilian side. So I think I was surprised to hear they're not keeping up with the retirements, in air traffic control, and they've lowered the standards substantially. There used to be even physical requirements, but that, I guess, is hung up in a lawsuit, so they're not even testing that anymore. It's been for years, it's hung up in some kind of litigation, so they don't even do it. So yeah, I think that sounds like a great opportunity for us to get involved in the solution, and maybe get some local folks into that career path. So, and then separate, oh, go ahead.
Just a quick thing on that, with Malmstrom right here, obviously Malmstrom doesn't have much of a flying mission, but being that it is the Air Force, you will have a higher proportion of people that are interested in aviation.
Right.
You know, their job might be to turn a wrench on a missile currently, but you'll find a surprising number of them who are enthusiastic about aviation.
Yeah, and that's where I think, it's a great partnership for our community, and I actually I had an email exchange with Senator Tester's office yesterday on another subject, and I included a full write-up on this and said, Ben, this could really be something fantastic if we could do maybe a pilot program with MSU or with Rocky in the state. I mean, this isn't just impacting us, it impacts Kalispell and Helena too, because they're having similar issues. And on that same front, right now, Helena is working to get a ground radar because they don't have any radar coverage that goes below the mountains. Salt Lake Center can see from our radar, basically, and some radars to the south of there, can see the elevations above the peaks, but they can't see anything below the peaks. So the first 1,500 feet, they're blind. And so Helena has been working with, I believe, Senator Dane's office to try and fix that. And as they get that fixed, they're interested in having our tower monitor that radar overnight. From what I'm told, and I don't know this personally, I'm trying to reach out and confirm it, but Kalispell has also made some indications that they would like their airspace monitored overnight here. There's a lot of handoff traffic that flows east and west, and so that makes sense. And so I've sent an email out to both of them. Both of the airports will be in Butte this week. There's an annual conference. And so I'm trying to see if there's a possibility that I could run down to Butte real quick and maybe get a meeting and just kind of talk about this possibility. Because I think if the three of us work together, if Helena is successful in getting that radar, we could build kind of a training school here, which we already have with our tower. A lot of young controllers come through here to get certified and then move on. If we had the airspace of the other two airports, that would increase the class of pay, and so it would make our tower more desirable. And so I think that's a great ecosystem of opportunity for us, for the other airports in the state that use FA towers, and potentially for our educational institutions. So we'll continue to pursue that. It was kind of a surprise to us that the tower was down this much. We've had some transition over there, and I don't know if it was articulated to us before, but they were having such a difficulty filling those jobs. So
So are they proceeding with, are they doing the 10 p.m. to 5:45 every night now? Is that?
not every night.
No, the next one that I know of is March 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and it's midnight to 5:45.
Midnight.
Yeah, and so, my great concern with that whole situation is, and one of the things I pointed out to Salt Lake Center on the conference call is our numbers, our tower counts, typically you're talking about landings, touch and goes, you're talking about activity that hits the airfield. But our airspace is much more complex than that because we have a whole crap load of helicopters that orbit around our community in very low elevation, and C-130s in very low elevation that are orbiting the community in what I would call less controlled airspace. When you're at a high elevation crossing an airspace, you have a very direct line, and everyone knows where you're going to be. There's those air routes that are, you're flying it. Those helicopters, not so much. I mean, they're flying at a low elevation with a lot of variability. No one's really clear on exactly what they're trying to accomplish when they're out there in the pattern on the outskirts. They're not flying a specific, pattern that someone's going to recognize and go, this person's trying to line up for Fairfield, or something like that. It's less clear, and so we're about to get a new airplane in our community. The first Grable shows up in a few weeks. That plane, because it's so late in delivery, does not have a stable of certified pilots in the Air Force. There are some pilots, I think, in private, because that plane, the private sector version of that has been out now for about 2 years, I think, it's been certified. So there are some private pilots that are getting hours and getting certified, but the military was unable to complete the training mission prior to delivery, which was supposed to be, I think, in Alabama, if somebody might know.
That's correct, it's Alabama.
Yeah, and so now the schoolhouse is here. I mean, that is a complex mix of things happening, in our airspace that, we need to understand the full impact of. We have a category 3 approach, which allows us to receive low visibility landings, and that's another problem with the tower codes. We can't operate that system at all. So the taxpayers have invested several $1 million in this landing system that no longer can be used when our tower is out. And so that is the only category 3 approach between Minneapolis and Boise. So it's a big dark hole now when there are bad conditions, which obviously we have plenty of in Montana. That normally isn't that way. And so there's a lot going on in there, and we're trying to determine what the impacts should be on us. And if you think about it, when our snow crews are out there now, we have to interact with that airplane. Usually there's an intermediary that's doing that interaction for us. We're saying, hey, I want to get on the runway. Tower says, well, you can or you can't. And then they tell the plane, potentially, look, there might be someone on the runway. They're a last opportunity to prevent something. And so without that safety belt, we now have guys out there who are going to have to interact with that pilot and say, we are clear of the airfield, or we're not clear of the airfield. And so it does change quite a bit on the ground for us. And in those low visibility conditions, we've got to determine what our posture is. Are we willing to accept flights, or are we not willing to accept flights that are below our minimum for an ILS, which normally we would accept because we have a category 3, that can operate down to 600 feet. I think it's our minimum right now, isn't it, Rod?
Yeah, down to 600.
Now that's gone, so we've got to determine what the new limit is, and, in what circumstances would we accept or not accept flights, as the airport operator with no tower. And so I think we need to talk to Kalispell a little bit about what they're doing, because they're in a similar situation with the nightly closure. But I pointed out to FAA, because they started to say, well, look, you have almost no, landings, or, yeah, but there's stuff in the pattern at various elevations at all times of night. It's not, they were trying to say, well, you're the same as Bozeman or Kalispell. No, we're not. There's a more complex air field or air community here that others don't have, not to mention our readiness missions, for deliveries from Malmstrom. I mean, we are the active airfield, and all those types of things. So more to come on that. We're kind of in the threshold, portion of that project or issue.
Just one more comment. I was participating in that meeting, obviously, but do you think the tower would be receptive to being flexible with the weather component? I know that makes it more complex, but when we know that we're having a weather event like, last night, for example, could they shift their schedules at short notice and cover last night and then take another night off when we don't have to have instrument landing and snow removal?
That's a good point. I mean, I didn't think of asking the FAA that.
It's a good place to start, for sure.
Yeah.
Can you shoot an ILS into an uncontrolled?
Yeah.
An ILS you cannot. Sorry, not a cat free.
Not
Cat free, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, regular
Just
ILS.
an ILS, yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of airports operate that way, right? So like Steamboat Springs, where the JetBlue smacked its tail just a few months ago trying to miss a key air, that's an uncontrolled airport. It's the wild, wild west, man. You have people landing on both sides of that runway.
Director, question on tower vacancies. You said they were down by about a dozen. That's out of how many? Are we talking that's a 5% or a 10%?
He would like to have almost 30. I think it was 26, wasn't it?
Yes.
But he's a training tower, so he needs duplicate coverage because many of those operators are not ready to operate on their own. So my recollection is he said 26 was his full billet, and he's down about 12. He's got 14, I think he said.
What's the starting wage on those positions?
Boy, I hate to venture to guess, but
Apparently not enough.
right.
I want to say the FAA's pay bands are different. I don't think they hire and pay at GS. I think they might exist in their own because they have different.
They do GS and WG stuff as well.
Oh, do they? Okay.
They're well-paid careers. I mean, those you can make a very nice living with it.
All the inspectors are, 6 figures.
Yeah.
These guys are like this.
Yeah, I think the controllers are too. Especially if you, and there are